Her grandson gripped her wrist and snarled, "You're going to die soon anyway." Ruth didn't scream. She didn't beg. She looked straight past him at the hidden camera blinking behind the cabinet. "You just gave me everything I needed," she said. Trey blinked, confused. "What are you talking about, Granny?" But Ruth was already walking away, sealing the fate of the boy she once rocked to sleep. "All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from." The kitchen tile was cold against her cheek, slick with oil and something darker. Maybe her own blood. Maybe just spilled gravy. Ruth tried to suck in air, but her ribs screamed in protest. She lay still, afraid that even blinking might shift her cracked bones. Somewhere beyond the island counter, the front door creaked open. Shoes squeaked on laminate. "Seriously?" Trey's voice floated in, half muttered, half annoyed. He stepped into view, glanced down at her, and scoffed. "You always pretend. Every time you don't get your way, it's some drama." And then he stepped over her. Not around, not beside, over. His sneaker brushed the edge of her sweater as he made his way to the fridge, grabbed a soda, and left without looking back. Ruth closed her eyes and felt heat rush to her face, not from pain but shame. It soaked deeper than the fractured rib. It was the shame of remembering how she'd once rocked that boy to sleep, humming lullabies over the tremors of his baby body after his mother's overdose. She stayed on the floor long after the front door slammed again. At one point, the clock in the hallway chimed 6, then 7. Her fingers tingled. She rolled inch by inch toward the lower cabinets, her breath hissing. The effort to crawl felt like dragging a piano across gravel. Eventually, she reached the couch, hoisted herself up, and collapsed into the cushions, panting, half numb. Through the walls, she heard Trey shouting into his headset, "Bro, I told you, Granny's nuts." She just laid there like she forgot gravity. Laughter, game explosions, a muffled doorbell. Ruth sat in the dark, clutching a throw pillow, teeth gritted against the waves of pain. A delivery bag hit the front step. She watched from the window as Trey retrieved it with her debit card still in hand. Later, while he and his friends inhaled fries and wings, Ruth lay in bed, listening. It wasn't the food, or the money, or even the laughter. It was the indifference. She turned her head toward the nightstand and stared at the bottom drawer. It stuck slightly when she pulled, catching on the warped track. She yanked harder. From beneath a stack of old church bulletins and receipts, her hand found the key. She slid out of bed, gasping once when her weight shifted wrong, and shuffled to the closet. Under a folded quilt and her late husband's army jacket was a small wooden box, faded but sturdy, the kind carpenters used before plastic took over. The words "Private RK" were etched in ink that had long since bled at the edges. She touched the lid with trembling fingers. Not yet. Not yet. Morning brought the groaning ache of bruised ribs, and Trey standing over her with a scowl. "You going to do the laundry or fake pain all week?" he said, shaking an empty cereal box like it accused her too. Ruth didn't answer. She didn't whine. She didn't cry. She limped past him like a ghost moving through memory, her own silence a blade. When the door shut behind him, she went to her bed, lifted the quilt, and placed the wooden box on her lap. Her breath was shallow, her hands steady. She turned the old brass key, and the lock clicked. Inside were sheets of paper browned with time. One said, "August 9th, Trey used my debit card at 3:42 p.m. under R. Kelly, called Chase, logged." Another spoke to Alan. "He'll wait for my signal." Below it, a small flip phone and a list of passwords, names, and transaction dates. She stared. She remembered. And then she smiled. Ruth quietly observes Trey using her laptop while she's on painkillers. Not yelling, not dismissal. That's what Ruth couldn't forgive. Not what Trey said, how lightly he said it. "Relax, Granny, I got it." He said it over his shoulder while tapping away on her laptop, slouched in the kitchen like he paid the mortgage. The room still smelled faintly of icy hot from the patch Ruth pressed over her ribs that morning. Every breath reminded her she hadn't imagined the fall. She watched him from the hallway, clutching her warm mug of tea, the steam curling against her face like a warning. He thought she was still doped up from the pain meds. "Ordering groceries," he said without turning. "You said we were out of paper towels." But his fingers weren't clicking Amazon or Kroger. They moved too quickly. She knew those rhythms. She knew her own bank's layout better than her own backyard at this point. The logo blinked at the corner of the screen. She saw the familiar red and gray outline of Citizens First. She took a slow step back, said nothing, and padded to her room like a phantom. That night, when Trey left to meet a friend, Ruth pulled out a spiral-bound notebook she hadn't used since her daughter's funeral arrangements. She flipped past blank pages until she found a clean one and wrote at the top in careful, slanted pen, Trey, unauthorized charges. April 3rd, $42.99, Apple purchase. April 4th, $198.76, Gameplay Store. April 5th, $61.22, Grubhub. April 6th, $1,362, ACH transfer unknown. By April 9th, there were 12 entries. 12. Her ribs still throbbed, but she pulled on her spring coat and made her way to the local branch the next morning. The woman behind the counter smiled too much, a pity smile. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Kelly?" "I want to see every transaction on my checking account from March 25th onward," Ruth said. Her voice wasn't angry, it was even, like slicing cold pie. The teller's brows lifted slightly as she scanned the monitor. "Looks like you've had quite a bit of activity." "Show me." The printer spat out 10 pages. Ruth sat at the little desk they reserved for loan paperwork and spread them like a poker hand. Cash App, Venmo, a gas station in Trenton, DoorDash from somewhere called Wing Criminals, Atlantic City tolls, $6,243.80 gone. Ruth stared for a long time. Then she folded the printouts, stood, and asked for a new checking account. "Maiden name," she said. "Virginia records should have me as Ruth Ellen Kendrick." "No problem. Want to close the other one?" "Not yet." That afternoon, she changed her online banking password. She paused when the security question came up. "What was your daughter's favorite flower?" She typed it slowly. "Magnolia." At home, Trey was already fuming. "Why is the Wi-Fi down?" he barked from the living room. "I got an online exam." "Router's acting up," she called. He stormed into her hallway and tried the door to her bedroom. Locked. She sat quietly inside, screwing in the new bolt she'd picked up at Home Depot. She could still hear his sneakers pounding back down the hall. Slam, slam, slam. He wasn't used to locked doors. Later that night, while making tea, Ruth emptied the trash bin in the kitchen. Paper crinkled. Then a shape caught her eye, clean, creased, and glossy white. She pulled it out, unfolded it carefully. Real estate ownership transfer. Primary residence owner, Ruth E. Kelly. Transferee, Trey V. Fields. Signature, Ruth E. Kelly. She hadn't signed anything, but the scrawl on the bottom, it looked disturbingly close. Not since the night she found her daughter half-conscious on the bathroom floor, an empty pint of gin clutched in one hand and a cigarette burn scarring the linoleum, had Ruth's stomach twisted so violently. That night had turned Ruth's stomach so violently she'd never gone near the stuff again. But there it was. Lusty Lace Liquors, $148.33, 3:12 a.m., Ruth K. She sat at the kitchen table in silence, her tea going cold as her eyes blurred over the transaction list. The glow of her old Dell laptop lit up her face, and the login window to Trey's Venmo hovered in the corner. She hadn't guessed the password, she remembered it, DripGod13, same one he used for everything. She scrolled, $200 to Stack Zen Chips, $75 to Cash Queen, $223 with a fire emoji, $45 to Blunt Season, $1,100 to High Rollert with the caption, "Let's run it back." Each transfer chipped at her resolve until she stopped feeling sick and started feeling surgical. She opened a fresh Gmail draft addressed only to herself and began attaching screenshots. Page after page, timestamp after timestamp. When she reached the one marked Ruth K. used at Lust Lounge, Atlantic City, her breath caught. That one included an address. She hadn't left her zip code in 2 years. Her cursor hovered, then clicked forward. She didn't cry, but she did rise slowly, walk to the hall closet, and pulled down the plain brown Amazon box that had arrived last week. From the inside, she lifted a plastic-wrapped square and smiled grimly. A kitchen magnet shaped like a ceramic tomato. It stuck harmlessly to the fridge, but inside, nestled behind the fake stem, was a pinhole lens no bigger than the head of a nail. Let him try it. That evening, Ruth waited until Trey went out to grab tacos. She opened the contacts on her landline. She never saved names digitally, only initials and scribbled phone trees on notepads. She dialed the number marked A, Fort Bragg. "Alan Hines," said a gravelly voice on the third ring. "Alan," Ruth said quietly, "it's Ruth Kelly." There was a pause, then, "Jesus, Ruth, it's been, 15 years? You okay?" "I'm not calling to catch up," she said. "I need help. Quiet help. You still know how to track numbers? Alan let out a low whistle. If you've got bank trails, I've got highlighters. You give me 3 weeks, I'll clean them out without breaking the law. She didn't need to explain who him was. Alan had been at her daughter's funeral. He remembered the boy. Start gathering paper, he said. I'll bring the fire. That night, Ruth dimmed the lights and rested on her recliner, eyes shut but ears wide open. At exactly 2:17 a.m., she heard the familiar creak of the floorboards by her door. She didn't move. The door creaked open. Light footsteps, not careful enough. The faint rustle of her desk drawer. Then the sound she was listening for, the whisper of unfolded paper. She knew exactly what he'd found. Her birth certificate, the one tucked behind the family Bible she hadn't opened since 2009. She heard him slide it into something, maybe his backpack, and retreat with the soft confidence of someone who thought he'd gotten away with it. She waited until the front door clicked shut. Then she opened her eyes, stood slowly, and walked straight to the fridge. The tomato magnet blinked once. Recording saved. The password to her old savings account wasn't her birthday. It was her daughter's clean date, one Trey never remembered. Ruth typed it in with a slow, deliberate press of each key. 061204. The screen blinked once, then gave way to a long-forgotten dashboard. Her heart kicked up. There it was, her original SunTrust savings account, still open, still untouched. The balance hadn't moved in years. That was about to change. She enabled two-factor authentication, routing every verification code to her landline, the clunky beige one in the kitchen still mounted to the wall with its spiral cord. No one under 30 would dare touch it. As the security prompts loaded, her eyes flicked to the nearby shoebox. She hadn't opened it in decades. It still smelled like time. Inside were her daughter's rehab intake papers from St. Andrew's Recovery, yellowed, creased, but intact. She smoothed them gently, hand brushing across her daughter's shaky signature at the bottom. Underneath, tucked behind a dated Medicaid card, was a sealed envelope marked for Mom only. Ruth had never opened it. She did now. Inside was a short letter, no more than a page, a few coffee stains, tear tracks, and the sentence that made her breath stick in her chest. Trey's father's name is Marcus D. Freeman, lives in Tampa. He doesn't know. I didn't want to make it harder on him. Harder on him, not Trey. Marcus. Ruth stared at the name like it was a bomb she hadn't realized was in her lap. She looked at the date, 2005. And then, for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Later that evening, she sat at her laptop again, the worn notebook open beside her. This time, her mission was observation. She opened Trey's Instagram and began to scroll. Most of it was performative fluff, him flexing his wristwatch, posing with sneakers he couldn't afford, but the real story was buried in the DMs. She knew the reset trick, forgot password, routed through the Gmail he'd signed up with on her old desktop. She reset it, waited for the ping on her backup inbox, and logged in. Within minutes, she was scrolling through messages with a woman named Nikki Golden, NYC bikini selfies, crypto scams, and this from 3 nights ago. Soon as the old bat's gone, this house is ours. I'm not letting probate slow me down. Ruth stared at the screen until her fingers stopped shaking. Then she clicked print. By the next morning, Ruth had begun her next test. She left a fake medical bill folded neatly on the kitchen counter. Emergency cardiology consult, $3,947.22. Due immediately. She watched from the hallway as Trey walked past, read it, and tossed it in the trash without blinking. No questions, no concern. Just a quick glance and a scoff. Ruth moved silently to the basement and lifted the lid off the old freezer chest. Hidden beneath bags of frozen peas and ground turkey was the war safe, a dull steel box with a coated lock. She placed it inside, reset the dial, and pressed the lid closed. The click sounded final. From that point on, every grocery order came in her name only. She used her new account, new login, new passwords. Milk, eggs, apples, fiber cereal, canned beans. No Hot Pockets, no Red Bull, no beef jerky for Trey's late-night binges. That afternoon, she sat down at the typewriter she hadn't touched since her daughter's parole appeal. She typed a short, matter-of-fact letter to Marcus D. Freeman. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. Your son, Trey, is living with me. There are things you should know. If you're willing to talk, write me back. No pressure, no lies. She mailed it with a return envelope and a blank page for his reply. 2 days later, just after sunrise, the mail slot creaked open. Ruth padded to the door in her slippers, opened the envelope, and read the note written in bold blue ink. I've been waiting for this. What do you need me to do? The morning air had that dry snap to it, the kind that made Ruth's bones ache before she'd even left the bed. She sat up slowly, pulling the faded cardigan tighter around her shoulders, and listened. Trey's bedroom door was closed, his heavy bass music leaked through like a heartbeat she could never sink to. She grabbed her purse, quietly slipped on her orthopedic shoes, and called out toward the hallway. I'm heading to that memory test the clinic scheduled. Don't wait on me. No reply, just a grunt followed by the sound of rapid gunfire from his video game. She slid into Alan's pickup an hour later, clutching the manila envelope like a blood sample. Alan nodded without a word and pulled onto the highway, the silence between them thick with the weight of strategy. The storage unit sat at the far edge of a rundown complex off Route 5. Half the doors rusted, the pavement split like old scar tissue. Alan keyed in the code and swung the metal door open. A folding table had been set up inside. On it, a battered composition notebook, Ruth's old banking statements organized by year, a prepaid burner phone, and 3 stamped, notarized estate documents she'd signed under Alan's supervision. You've documented everything, Alan said, flipping through the records. Time-stamped withdrawals, voicemail transcriptions, even the fake DoorDash charges. Ruth, you got him nailed. She exhaled. Not yet. I need him to think he's winning. Just for a bit longer. Alan raised an eyebrow. You really want to bait him? I want to trap him. Back home, Ruth set the hook. She created a new checking account through a smaller credit union, listed under the maiden alias she'd used in college, Ruth Keene. She seeded it with $2,000, just enough to look like an overlooked stash. Then printed a bank login slip with handwritten notes in shaky cursive, exactly the kind Trey had scavenged from her desk before she left. She left it in plain sight, next to a heating pad and a bottle of Tylenol. Within 48 hours, the account was empty. All $2,000 transferred in $200 intervals to a Cash App alias she already knew belonged to Trey. He didn't even try to hide it. That evening, he swaggered through the kitchen with a greasy bag of wings and a 12-pack of soda, tossed his jacket over a chair, and grinned. Memory test go okay, Granny? He asked, voice syrupy. She smiled softly. I forgot I had that account. Guess lucky you remembered before the bank did. Ruth held her face still. Mm-hmm. In the quiet of night, she sat with a steaming mug of chamomile, her checkbook open in front of her. The big transfers came next. Her VA benefits rerouted to the trust. Her pension redirected. Every bit of stock she still held from Walter's old rail job cashed and moved to an entity with Alan as trustee. The money was safe now. Trey could scream into the void all he wanted. She walked to the bedroom and unscrewed the back panel of her antique jewelry box, where she'd embedded a discreet camera. Its lens now faced her bed, angled perfectly to capture anything that happened while she slept. Alan had helped her set it up, said it was cheap insurance with high returns, and it paid off sooner than she expected. That night, around 2:17 a.m., she cracked one eye open when the hallway floor creaked, the sound sharp and deliberate. Trey. She stilled her breathing, letting her body fall limp like a woman deep in sleep. He opened the bedroom door slowly, a sliver of hallway light slicing across her quilt. She heard the whisper click of a phone camera. Once, twice, then again. The light glinted briefly as he picked up something from her nightstand. She heard the prescription bottle rattle. The next morning, Ruth reviewed the footage on her laptop. With trembling fingers, there he was, crouched over her side table, photographing every medication label, painkillers, heart meds, her inhaler, each one documented like he was building a dossier. Ruth leaned back in her chair, pulse steady, hands cold. Alan had told her once, people like Trey don't just cross lines, they erase them. It started just after midnight. Ruth sat in her recliner in the den, robe cinched tight, laptop glowing softly in her lap. Trey's bedroom door had slammed shut 2 hours ago. The house had gone still. But Ruth's fingers moved like clockwork. Each click was a closing door. First, her real savings account, the one with the lump sum pension she'd never mentioned, transferred to cashier's checks, 4 in total, then wrapped in wax paper and sealed inside a small manila envelope. Alan would pick them up in the morning for safekeeping. Second, she called the electric company and removed Trey's access to the joint utility login. No more bill redirections. Third, the thermostat. She reset it and changed the password on the app. By 1:22 a.m., the alarm system's passcode was new. Only she and Alan knew it. She sipped lukewarm tea, logged into her credit union's account dashboard, and went line by line, canceling every auto-pay Trey had connected, food delivery services, app subscriptions, a mystery gym membership in a city she'd never visited. She paused when she saw a recurring charge labeled Wellness RX Pharmacy. She'd never signed up for one, but the shipping address was hers. With her phone on speaker, she called her doctor's office. A tired voice answered. Valley Medical, this is Rachel. This is Ruth Kelly. I just need to ask if someone tried to access my medical file recently. The silence on the other end was brief but telling. We got a login attempt last week, Rachel said slowly, from a flagged IP. When it failed security, we locked the file and filed an alert. It was a home IP. You should have received a call. I didn't. Ruth's voice was like gravel. But I know who did it. She hung up and opened a second browser. Time to plant the seed. She typed Adult Protective Services Confidential Abuse Report. She wrote with precision, listing observed behaviors, financial red flags, and emotional mistreatment. She didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. The details spoke loudly enough. Next, she picked up Trey's tattered work badge from the kitchen counter. The name of his supposed IT job was printed in smug little letters beneath the lamination Hearthstone Solutions. She smiled. She'd called them earlier and left a message. Now she called back. HR, this is Samantha. This is Ruth Kelly, she said plainly. I believe someone at your company is using a stolen identity. Mine. She let the line go quiet. Then she added, You might want to check the hiring paperwork. That's not his name. She slept 4 hours, not peacefully but deeply. Her muscles had learned not to trust calm. At 9:03 a.m., the howling began. Trey came storming down the hallway, barefoot, shirtless, yelling over his shoulder. The card's declining! Why is the Wi-Fi off? Why is it freezing in here? Ruth calmly sliced a banana onto her oatmeal, unfazed. She added a touch of honey and stirred. You changed the thermostat. She looked up, smile small. Didn't like how warm it was getting. Trey's face was red, his fists clenched. You're trying to mess with me. No, she said, setting the spoon down. I'm making myself comfortable in my home. He paced the kitchen like a trapped animal. The microwave clock blinked from a power reset, and the internet router light was out. You're not right, he muttered. You're not all there. I'm right here, she said quietly. And I see everything now. He stepped forward so quickly the chair nearly tipped behind her. You're going to die soon anyway, he hissed, grabbing her wrist. Why not make it easy? Everything in the room froze, except for the tiny red light on the camera embedded in the cabinet molding behind him. It blinked once, then again. Ruth didn't pull back. Her pulse stayed steady. She looked him in the eye, calm and steady, and said, Thank you. Trey blinked. For what? But she didn't answer. She simply stood, walked to her room, and locked the door, leaving him standing there confused, angry, unaware he just stepped into something far larger than himself. Ruth sat with her back straight, hands folded, the mid-morning sun warming the front porch. Alan leaned against the railing, his silver beard catching the light. She handed him the flash drive like it was a relic. On it, the clip of Trey grabbing her wrist and saying what no grandson should ever say. Alan watched it once, jaw tightening with every second. When it ended, he didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't offer pity. He said what Ruth needed. It's enough to start, Ruth nodded. Then let's start. She didn't wait. That afternoon, she uploaded the clip to a private folder, then took a screenshot and messaged it to Trey's online girlfriend, the same girl he'd bragged to about getting Granny's place soon. Ruth had found her by scrolling Trey's tagged posts. Her username was something cute and brittle, at Cinnabons for life. Alongside the video, Ruth typed, You still want in? No response came, but Ruth knew better than to expect one. Seeds didn't shout when they grew. They pushed through soil in silence. She began losing her keys on purpose, slipping them under couch cushions, behind the sugar tin, once even inside her bra. Each time she'd stage a mini-search and watched Trey's reaction. The first time, he sighed. The second, he snapped. By the fifth, he accused her of faking memory loss for attention. She caught it all on camera. That weekend, while Trey was out job hunting in his pajamas, Ruth methodically boxed up her valuables. her wedding china, her late husband's medals, the sapphire brooch she wore to her daughter's high school graduation. She labeled the boxes in code and loaded them into Alan's truck. "What are we calling this one?" Alan asked, lifting a crate. "Frosting pans," she smiled. They both knew there wasn't a cupcake in sight. That night, she unsealed the shoebox beneath her bed. Worn correspondence from her late husband, Will. Mostly typed letters, some with smudged stamps, others with cryptic scribbles along the margins. One envelope held a small card with strange slashes and dots, an encryption code he'd used in his army days. She held it to her chest like a rosary. Morning came. Ruth poured herself coffee and sat beside Alan in the back room they'd turned into their unofficial war room. He placed a folder on the table. "You were right," he said grimly. "He's taken out 4 online loans, all under your name. Fake phone numbers, routed bank aliases. One account is under the name R. Keeley." Her breath left her slowly, like air leaking from a tire. "Do they know?" "Not yet. But the IRS will—" She tapped her fingers once on the table, then reached for her rotary phone. The receiver felt heavy but sure in her hand. She dialed the IRS fraud line and listened to the recorded options before selecting Report Identity Theft. She gave her name, then Trey's, then the alias, then the transactions. When she hung up, the quiet in the house wasn't peace. It was waiting. Ruth returned to the kitchen. The light was golden through the blinds, striping the linoleum like tiger skin. She made a ham sandwich, ate half, then wrapped the rest for later. She didn't know what Trey would do when the hammer fell. She just knew it was coming. An hour later, Trey was upstairs gaming when his phone rang, shattering through the walls like a dropped bottle. Ruth heard him shout, "Who the hell is this?" A pause. "You think I'm dumb enough to fall for that scam?" Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean, federal notice?" She closed her eyes and let the sound of it wash over her. The stumble in his voice, the fear he couldn't swallow fast enough. The IRS didn't do prank calls. And this one? It was very real. It purred like arrogance. That Dodge Challenger, matte black, low and loud, parked like a trophy in front of her modest one-story ranch. The red bow perched on the hood like an insult. Trey stepped out, grinning like he'd won something. "What do you think?" he said, swinging the key fob like it was made of gold. "It's an investment. Real estate's too slow. He patted the car. "This holds value." Ruth blinked against the sunlight, her fingers curled around the hem of her sweater. "Looks fast," she murmured. "It is," he said, practically vibrating with ego. "New rims, custom wrap. Got it for a steal from Whitaker Auto." Ruth's gaze didn't leave the car. "Whitaker Auto, you said?" "Yeah, guy gave me a deal 'cause I paid up front." He leaned in closer and dropped his voice like a man revealing state secrets. "Cash. Well, card. But still smart, right?" She smiled, the kind that meant something different behind the teeth. "Very." That afternoon, while Trey bragged on speakerphone to a friend about taking control of Granny's finances, Ruth sat at the kitchen table, the dealer name scribbled on a notepad beside her. She typed deliberately, like every keystroke was a nail in a coffin. Whitaker Auto had a website. More importantly, they had an online financing tool. She filled out the Contact US form, claiming to be a fraud victim. "I'm a 73-year-old woman," she wrote. "I believe my grandson used my retirement account for an unauthorized vehicle purchase. Please call me directly." She clicked submit and stared out the window. The car gleamed like sin under the fading sun. Next, DMV. Ruth called and asked how to report elder financial exploitation. When they transferred her, she described the transaction, gave her name, the last 4 digits of her social, and let them know the card in question had been compromised. The woman on the other end listened carefully. By sundown, Ruth received a bank alert. The last active credit card in her name had been flagged and frozen. The description read, "Potential fraudulent activity, high-value vehicle purchase." Ruth didn't react. She just pressed print on a fake estate confirmation document she'd mocked up the night before. It used all the right phrases: asset disbursement, early beneficiary designation, probate bypass clause. She emailed it to Trey's burner address with a short subject line: "You're inheriting early. Congrats." Within 20 minutes, Trey was live on Instagram, the Challenger in the background, red bow still attached. "Yeah, we up now," he was saying to a dozen viewers. "Granny finally did something right. Said I'm getting the house early, so I figured might as well pull the trigger." Ruth's screen recorded the whole thing, making sure to catch every mention of early inheritance and my money now. The next morning, Whitaker Auto called. "Miss Kelly?" a woman asked. "This is Dana from the dealership. I reviewed your form and I'm so sorry. If you're telling me that account wasn't authorized, we absolutely want to make it right." "I am," Ruth said, her voice steady, "and thank you." By lunch, Dana had sent Ruth the full purchase document. Trey had forged her signature. Ruth slid the paper into her growing evidence folder and poured herself a cup of tea. She stirred honey into it and let the steam fog her glasses, the smell of lemon balm and peppermint surrounding her like armor. Dinner came. Trey was unusually cheerful, loud in a way that tried too hard. Ruth ladled soup into a bowl and placed it on the table. They ate in silence, punctuated by the faint sound of Trey scrolling on his phone, then headlights in the window, white, blinding. Trey squinted and got up. "Who the hell?" The tow truck's hydraulic whine pierced the evening. Ruth kept sipping her soup as he sprinted outside, barefoot, yelling, "Hey, you can't do that! That's my car!" A mechanic in a branded jumpsuit didn't even look at him. He clipped the Challenger's front wheels, cranked the winch, and lifted the car like it weighed nothing. The red bow flopped in the wind. Ruth stood in the doorway, spoon still in her hand. "You said it was an investment," she called calmly. "Looks like someone finally made a return." It came just after midnight, buried between a scam call and a spam warranty alert. The voice was deeper, hoarser, but still carried the same quiet regret it had the day he left with a duffel bag and a hangover that nearly ended him. "Ruth, it's Marcus. I got your letter. I didn't know. If there's still time to make it right, I'm ready." Ruth didn't move for a full minute. The phone lit her lap, her hand trembling only slightly as she hit save. She stared at the darkened living room, the shadows on her walls, the blanket pulled up to her ribs. Then she whispered, "All right then." The next morning, she took the old Saturn, the one with the stubborn passenger window, and drove 40 miles south to a tiny cafe tucked behind a bait shop. Marcus was already there, wearing a suit coat that didn't quite fit and hands that wouldn't stop folding a napkin. He stood when he saw her. "You look older," she said, slipping into the booth. "That's what happens," he smiled, apologetic. "Clean now, 5 years. Legal aid, mostly custody cases, some housing court." She nodded once. "I don't need your resume, I need your memory." "You remember what Trey was like at 5, 10, 16? Marcus winced. "I remember the funeral, and I remember not stepping up." Ruth pulled out a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, digital logs, credit rejections, even the deed Trey had tried to forge. "He's built this on sand," she said, "and it's about to come down." Marcus flipped through the pages. "You did all this, with help." And silence. He exhaled sharply. "What do you want from me?" Ruth leaned in, her voice was flat. "I want you to be the thing he never thought he'd see, accountability. You'll be a witness if this goes to court. You'll confirm what I say, and when he looks up, you'll be sitting there, not for him, for me." Marcus closed the folder and met her eyes. "He's not ready for that." "No," Ruth said, "but I am." Later that afternoon, Ruth sat at her kitchen table with Alan, building what they quietly called the book, a timeline of everything Trey had done. Each forgery, every login, phone impersonations, unauthorized loans, identity theft across 4 aliases. Every detail had a date, a screenshot, a voice clip, or a witness. "Your evidence binder," Alan muttered, flipping a tab, "reads like a RICO case." "I'm not after prison," Ruth said. "I'm after removal, conservatorship, inheritance, health directives. His name comes off everything." Her attorney filed the preliminary paperwork that same day. Conservatorship reversal, financial abuse clause, petition to void next of kin status due to demonstrable fraud. By that evening, Trey had already tried to apply for a private loan using a new alias, one Ruth had already flagged to 3 financial bureaus. The application was denied. The lender reported the ID as suspicious. At dinner, Trey didn't speak. His phone buzzed once, twice, then stopped. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. The next morning, Ruth didn't make him guess. She left a handwritten note on the outside of his bedroom door, black ink, careful penmanship. "Come to the porch at 7. Bring nothing but the truth." He wouldn't know what it meant, not yet. It wasn't just the dollar amounts, it was the timestamps, the locations, the careless nicknames attached to transfer notes. A $120 Venmo at 2:04 a.m. labeled Fire Hit Me Again. A Cash App transaction sent to a handle called it Quick Flip King. An Uber Eats charge to a hotel an hour away from the house the same night Trey claimed he was helping a friend move. Ruth sat at the kitchen table under the dull light of a single bulb, her glasses perched on her nose. Across from her, Alan scrolled on his laptop, cursor highlighting line after line of data exported from Trey's apps, accounts, and logs she had quietly recorded or recovered. 3 months, Alan muttered, adjusting his glasses. 3 months of behavior that looks like a blueprint for exploitation. Ruth nodded, silent. In her lap was a worn ledger from her husband's military days, now filled with columns not of ration stamps or troop locations, but of passwords, IP addresses, transaction IDs. Each entry was meticulously logged in her careful cursive. Oh, we've got screen captures, Alan added, text threats, and this one voicemail where he pretends to be you and fails miserably. I hope he's enjoying his acting debut, Ruth said dryly. Alan looked up, grinned thin. I just spoke with Miriam, your attorney. She's ready to file the civil case. First, elder abuse, theft, financial coercion, impersonation. She thinks a judge will fast-track it. Ruth reached for her thermos, sipped cold coffee, and exhaled. Then let's set the clock. They did just that. Before noon, Miriam submitted the full civil filing with the county clerk. Ruth's name now sat atop the plaintiff's column versus Trey Field's grandson. Her claim, violation of fiduciary trust, fraudulent access to protected financial assets, emotional and financial abuse. Next stop was the sheriff's office. Ruth walked in wearing her powder blue church jacket, shoulders squared. She handed over a manila envelope thick with documents and a USB drive. I'm here to file a formal deposition, she said. This is about elder exploitation, and I've brought receipts. The deputy didn't scoff. He took the packet with both hands and nodded. Back at the house, Ruth moved fast. She called the power, water, and gas companies and revoked Trey's access from every shared account. She rerouted all utility communications to her new email under her maiden name, her real name, Ruth Kessler. By mid-afternoon, Trey had caught on. He stormed into the house just as Ruth was closing the blinds, his voice cracked with disbelief. What the hell happened to the Wi-Fi? I can't even sign into PayPal. Try a library, Ruth said, not looking up. He scoffed. You did this to get back at me? For nothing? You're losing it, Granny. Ruth's smile didn't reach her eyes. No, sweetheart, I'm just finding it. The next day, she walked calmly into the bank for a scheduled appointment with Miriam to finalize the trust's new configuration. But Trey had followed her. He pushed through the doors like he owned the place, shouting her name like a curse. 2 guards intercepted him before he reached the desk. You're harassing a client, one said. Ruth didn't flinch. Escort him out. He's not on any of my accounts anymore. Outside, Trey flailed, shouting half-truths, demanding to be let back into a life that no longer had a space for him. Ruth turned her back to him without a word. By the time he drove back to the house, still seething, it was past dark. He parked haphazardly, half on the grass, half in the driveway, and ran up the porch steps. The front door didn't budge. A silver padlock hung where the handle had been. Pinned next to it, taped over the mail slot, was a letterhead with bold black letters stamped in red. This residence is under civil review. Trespassing will result in prosecution. She read the message 3 times before her hand stopped shaking long enough to tap screenshot. The profile photo showed a man in a hoodie with mirrored sunglasses standing beside a low-end sports car. His name, probably fake, was Jay Hunter, and his grammar wasn't sloppy. That was the part that chilled her. It wasn't rage texted, it was careful, like a receipt left on purpose. The timestamp was 3:11 a.m. Ruth slid the phone across the kitchen table to Alan, who raised an eyebrow as he read. You think this guy's bluffing? She asked quietly, voice brittle but steady. Alan shook his head, already pulling his laptop from its case. Not bluffing, boasting. Within an hour, Alan had traced 2 of the 4 aliases Trey used for crypto wallets. One was under a defunct gaming tag he used in high school. The others, sloppy creations tied to prepaid cards and burner emails, evidence of both fraud and desperation. The payment trail zigzagged through betting sites, gift card services, and peer-to-peer lenders. Some of the funds had landed in a known offshore crypto exchange, but all of them pointed back to Trey. That's stolen money, Alan muttered, and it's being funneled through your name. Ruth pressed her palms against her thighs. The house was quiet, too quiet. No TV from upstairs, no music bleeding through the bathroom door. Trey had gone silent online too, a silence that felt more dangerous than noise. She opened her laptop and pulled up a blank Word document. At the top, she typed in bold, "Obituary Trey Allen Fields." Line by line, she wrote, "Not his death, but his erosion, a man who pawned legacy for fast cash. A grandson who stepped over the woman who raised him and still demanded her name as currency." She didn't cry while writing, she didn't pause. Each sentence felt like a cut being stitched shut. When she was done, she logged into her old Facebook account and posted, "I'm done being quiet. For anyone who needs to hear it, silence is over." Within minutes, the post began to spread. People she'd gone to church with, old neighbors, even one of her daughter's old sponsors liked or shared it. No one knew exactly what it meant, but it didn't matter. It was enough. And then came the tidal wave. Trey's girlfriend, or maybe ex-girlfriend now, posted a TikTok. She sat in her bedroom, red-eyed and furious, holding up screen-recorded DMs where Trey promised a down payment for an apartment once Granny's house clears. Her voice cracked as she read aloud a message. "She's old, she's forgetful, I'll get it all soon." The video blew up. Comments poured in. One said, "This dude's going to rot." Another simply said, "Tag the IRS." Ruth watched it all unfold in real time. She didn't reply, just copied the clip link and added it to her binder. Evidence came in strange forms now, viral videos, crypto screenshots, forged PDFs, but it all stacked the same. Miriam, her attorney, called that afternoon. "It's time to remove him," she said bluntly. "Medical directives, emergency contact, all of it." "Do it," Ruth said. "Leave no doors unlocked." By nightfall, her home was fortress quiet. Ruth set the new alarm code, double-checked the lock on the camera-mounted jewelry box, and slipped her evidence binder beneath the floorboard behind her bed. At 2:38 a.m., the banging started. She didn't flinch, just sat up, robe pulled around her shoulders, and reached for the landline. "Open the door, Ruth." Trey's voice slurred through the storm door. "We need to talk. You can't do this." She didn't respond, just pressed 9, then 1 again. When the red and blue lights lit the living room, she stepped back from the curtain. A deputy knocked gently. She unlocked the door. He nodded at her and turned to the young man fuming in the driveway. "Mr. Fields, step outside. You've been reported for identity theft." After the cops let Trey go, citing family context and pending review, he didn't come home. He didn't text. No more slamming doors, no barking demands for food, no stomping upstairs like a tantruming child in grown man's sneakers. The house felt taller without his presence. The walls exhaled. Ruth, meanwhile, got to work. She sat at the dining room table in her worn cardigan, pen in hand, rewriting her will for the third time in 2 months. But this one felt final. Her pen didn't tremble, no hesitation, as she struck out Trey Allen Fields as beneficiary of anything. Not the house, not the car, not even the battered quilt he'd been wrapped in as a child. She added a clause, "In the event of my death, I leave all material possessions, liquid assets, and fiduciary responsibility to the Ruth Kelly Trust." No mention of next of kin. Her attorney notarized it by noon. Ruth had 3 copies made. One was couriered to her lawyer, one she handed to her primary doctor. The third she tucked into the donation envelope for her church, folded into a thank you note with a check made out to Hope Chapel Youth Outreach. Memo, in honor of Lacey K. Lacey, her daughter, Trey's mother, the tether that once made her forgive everything. By Thursday morning, Ruth's name had been fully scrubbed from anything Trey could exploit. The house deed had been refiled under the trust. The utilities no longer showed him as an alternate contact. Her Medicare account had new passwords, and her phone plan had been rerouted to a flip phone Alan gave her, a number Trey didn't know. The best part? She'd filed trespass paperwork, a signed affidavit filed through the sheriff's office and mailed to Trey's last confirmed email. If he stepped foot on the property again, it would no longer be a family dispute. It would be criminal trespass. The silence that followed was not peace, it was anticipation. Ruth brewed coffee in the mornings and watched his social media die like autumn leaves. His Instagram was wiped clean. TikTok videos vanished. Threads accusing him of theft and deceit bloomed in comment sections like fungus on wet concrete. Venmo payments got reversed. DMs leaked. No one answered his calls. Even his online girlfriend blocked him, captioning a selfie with, "Ask his grandma where your money went." "I did." Ruth didn't gloat. She watered her spider plants, listened to Patsy Cline in the kitchen, took walks with her neighbor Ginny, who didn't ask questions, just brought homemade banana bread. But at night, she still checked. She logged in under her dummy account and scrolled through Trey's former kingdom. Nothing, just a username. No content, no bio, no updates, just a void where a boy used to crow. And then on Sunday evening, as the light slipped gold across the table and she reached for her knitting, her inbox pinged. From Trey Fields. Subject, why? No greeting, no apology, just 5 words centered like a dagger. You ruined me. Why? Ruth stared at it for a long time. Her pulse didn't race, her hands didn't shake. She clicked open a blank reply, typed slowly. Because you stepped over me, Trey. I just kept walking. She hovered over send for 3 full seconds, then deleted every word, shut the laptop, and walked away. He didn't exist in her world anymore. He wasn't family. He was a cautionary tale. The freeze wasn't just financial. It was spiritual. Ruth sat at the bank that Monday morning in her pressed wool coat, fingers still stiff from the cold, as the manager printed confirmation after confirmation. Every account now sealed, every card nullified, every alert routed to her new burner number. No more backdoors, no more loopholes, no more mercy. The final stroke came at the law office where she slid her updated documents across the desk. Her power of attorney, once casually assigned to Trey in the fog of misplaced hope, was now transferred to the woman who had stood by Lacey through every relapse and redemption, Diane Mercer. Sober 17 years, iron-spined church treasurer. She won't blink, Ruth said quietly. That's what I need now. Diane didn't reply. She just nodded once and signed. By Wednesday, the sheriff's department made it official. Trey Fields received a certified notice. Vacate the premises by 5 p.m. Friday or face civil enforcement. No yelling, no warnings, just paperwork and procedure. Like Ruth knew he hated. Silent systems with power he couldn't charm, bluff, or bully. Trey didn't storm, didn't beg, just glared through the storm door the next morning, jaw tight, hoodie pulled over his eyes. She didn't open it. Instead, Ruth brewed a fresh pot of coffee, turned on the classical station, and waited for the moving van. The movers, 2 soft-spoken brothers in matching coveralls, loaded his belongings without question. They wrapped his flat screen in thick gray blankets, taped the lid shut on a box labeled Sneaker Collection. One of them held up a cracked lava lamp, shrugged, and dropped it in a bin marked Donate. Ruth sat in the recliner, ankles crossed, knitting without looking down. By sunset, the house felt clean again. Hollow, but clean. She gathered what Trey had left behind. An old PlayStation, a pair of gold-stamped headphones, even his monogrammed duffel bag, and listed them for sale online under a burner eBay handle. Within 24 hours, all of it was gone. She donated every dollar to a women's shelter 2 counties over. No trace, no tribute. Her lawyer called that evening. We can give him one last offer, he said. Repay what's documented or we escalate. Trial, public records, the works. Ruth thought about it for a full minute. Offer it, she said, but don't negotiate. And so on the final morning, Trey showed up. He didn't knock. He just stood by the porch rail, hands in his pockets, watching Ruth rake the leaves into tight little piles. The wind caught one pile and scattered it. She didn't chase it. His eyes were sunken now. His voice was when he finally spoke. So that's it, huh? Ruth leaned on the rake and nodded once. It is. He looked away, no apology, no ownership, just resentment curdling on his tongue. She said nothing more. She didn't owe him a final conversation. Trey turned, slung his backpack over one shoulder, and started down the driveway, sneakers scraping against the gravel. He didn't look back. But something flickered in the corner of Ruth's eye, metal glinting from a side pocket of the bag. She dropped the rake and stepped closer to the window. Inside the mesh pocket, her wedding ring, the one she hadn't worn in decades but kept always in the velvet box in her nightstand drawer. Gone. It had been Harold's, hand-picked with his calloused fingers from a jeweler 2 towns over, bought with a bonus he got for fixing a leaking tank in a winter storm back in '72. It wasn't flashy, just a narrow gold band with a scratch across the side where Ruth had caught it on the old screen door the day he proposed. But that scratch was theirs, like a wrinkle in the skin of memory. Now it was gone. She sat in the back pew of First Methodist, her coat still buttoned, the morning chill clinging to her like old grief. The sanctuary was empty except for the soft creak of wood and the faint scent of lemon oil and candle smoke. Pastor Lane spotted her and came down the aisle quietly, not like a man in a hurry, more like someone approaching a living question. "I think I made him this way," Ruth said before he even sat. Lane's brow furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. She folded her hands over her lap and let the silence stretch, like testing the depth of a pond before stepping in. "When Lacey died," she said, "I wasn't just sad. I was guilty. Guilty that I didn't catch it sooner. Guilty she chose that path. Guilty. I was relieved when it ended. And Trey, he was what was left of her." Lane leaned forward, elbows on knees. "That's a heavy thing to put on a child." "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "But I think I kept letting him hurt me so I could pretend I was helping her." He nodded, slow. "That ring was a symbol, but you're the legacy. You're still here, still standing." She swallowed, throat tight. "It wasn't just a ring. It was a promise." Ruth stood that afternoon and walked the 3 blocks to the sheriff's substation. The officer on duty was young, barely shaving age, but she gave her statement, crisp and clear. Theft, suspect known, evidence, and a screenshot from Facebook Marketplace. Listing number 2243989, gold ring, vintage, sentimental value, price $200 or best offer. An hour later, she got a call from Al Jenkins, who ran the town's only pawn shop and had once driven Harold to the ER when he split his chin on a fishing trip. "Ruth," he said, "I didn't know it was yours, but I held it. I can hold it again." The ring came home 2 days later, wrapped in brown butcher paper, warm from Al's palm. Ruth held it to the light. The scratch was still there, that familiar line of imperfect history. She closed her fingers around it and breathed deep. She had it resized the next morning. The jeweler's hands were gentle, careful. Ruth watched the gold warm under the torchlight, melt slightly, reform. A small adjustment, but a powerful one. When the ring slid onto her finger again, perfect fit, it felt like stitching a chapter closed with real thread. But closure wasn't quiet. That evening, Ruth sat at her kitchen table with her war journal open beside a brand new microphone. Her granddaughter's old laptop hummed quietly, screen glowing with a recording app. A title filled the top banner in bold text, "Inheritance, What I Took Back." She pressed record. Her voice, steady, honest, a little cracked around the edges, filled the room. "I'm not telling this because I want pity. I'm telling it because I spent too long pretending silence was strength. It isn't. It's just armor that rusts, and eventually it cuts you." She talked about Lacey, about Harold, about Trey. Not as a monster, not as a villain, but as a boy who'd never learned to see women as anything but tools for survival, and how she'd let him stay that way too long. The first episode was raw, unscripted, unedited, but it was real. She hit upload. The file spun, processed, published, and then her phone buzzed. A notification, voicemail, one new message. She tapped to play. Trey's voice crackled through the speaker, strained, low. "I'm sorry. Please, just talk to me. Once." Trey's face went pale under the fluorescent lights. His hands trembled as he slid the form back across the counter, the corners curling like leaves in fire. The woman behind the glass didn't flinch. Her name tag read Vera, and her eyes held the same neutral steadiness Ruth used to wear when Trey lied about finishing schoolwork. "But there has to be something," he muttered. "A review. A reconsideration. This is all just—" "My grandma got confused, that's all." Vera didn't blink. "Sir, your credit score is flagged under federal fraud investigation. You're no longer eligible for any lines of credit, loans, or secured banking services through this institution." Trey's mouth opened, then shut. His reflection in the marble counter looked thinner than he remembered, untethered. Faint sweat broke at his temple. He took out his phone and fired off a text with shaking thumbs. "You got what you wanted. Now can we talk, please?" It never delivered. Ruth had blocked him. The air smelled of lilac and clean earth. Ruth moved slowly along her garden bed, fingers pressing down into the soil with practiced ease. Beside her, Olivia knelt with a trowel, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. The girl had a stubborn streak Ruth admired. "Tomatoes need space," Ruth said gently, pointing. "Otherwise they fight each other for light." "Just like people," Olivia smirked. "You mean like Trey?" Ruth didn't answer her right away. She placed a seedling in the hole Olivia had dug and smoothed the dirt with her palm. "No," she said finally. "I mean like me. I kept trying to grow him in shade." The church youth group had brought Olivia into her life 3 months earlier, a 17-year-old firecracker with more anger than direction and a hunger for female guidance. Ruth hadn't expected to bond, but she had. They worked in companionable silence, the kind that hummed rather than hovered. That afternoon, Ruth boxed up 3 quilts, 2 unused coats, a set of dishes, and her daughter's old stereo, and drove it all to the women's shelter on Maple Street. A young woman opened the door and blinked in surprise. "You sure?" the girl asked, brushing braids from her eyes. "This is all real nice." Ruth smiled softly. "I won't need it where I'm going." "Where's that?" "Forward." That night, Ruth poured herself a cup of peppermint tea and sat at her kitchen table, the journal open beneath her hands. Its pages were nearly full now. She dipped her pen, scribbled a final entry. "He stepped over me, now I've stepped past him." She closed the book and placed it back inside the wooden box marked Private RK, the war chest, the ledger, the testament. On the screen, the podcast episode titled Inheritance, What I Took Back finale uploaded in 38 seconds. Her voice carried through the tiny speakers like stone on glass, firm, measured, and absolutely done with apologizing. "I was born Ruth Catherine Kelly. I buried my daughter. I raised a boy who became a man I don't recognize. But I still know who I am. And I'm reclaiming her." She paused the episode just before the credits. At her door, the wind shifted. A dull knock, no footsteps walking away. Ruth opened the door slowly. No one was there, just a small brown box on the welcome mat, no return address. She picked it up light, taped shut but not sealed with care. She brought it inside and placed it on the counter, cut through the tape with a butter knife, peeled it open. Inside, a wallet. Leather, worn, familiar. Every card removed, every photo gone. Just one thing tucked into the billfold. An old folded receipt from the liquor store. The first charge she'd found under her name. Ruth stared at it, then quietly shut the box. The porch light clicked on as the night pressed in, and Ruth, calm, clear, and still as ever, clicked play on her podcast again.